interesting case because a couple that's divorcing are in a dispute over what to do with the remaining frozen embryos, and you're entering into the suit. What would you like to see happen and why?
Basically, we're hoping that the Missouri courts will recognize the fact that embryos are human life. They're human beings. They're a full complement. All chromosomes that make up a human being are there as at the moment of fertilization with the sperm and the egg. That's what we have frozen in this case, and that's what we want the court to recognize and basically award the embryos to Alicia, who wants to bring them to life.
And it's not by accident that we're standing by the statue of Dred Scott, where personhood was an issue in that case. What's the parallel?
That's exactly right. Back in 1857, the Supreme Court of the United States decided that Dred Scott and his wife Harriet were property, that they weren't living human beings for purposes of under the law, and it parallels with the fact that we have the same situation here, where human beings are considered as property in the case before us, and we want to make sure that the appellate courts don't take that same avenue. They recognize them as human life.
And what sort of currents are you swimming against here? What's the prevailing argument that you have to overcome?
Well, currently the trial court decision basically determined that the embryos were property, and basically, however, they didn't follow the law as far as divorce goes and award their property to one parent or the other. They left them in joint custody, which is a whole other issue. But in any event, we want to affirm the fact that these are human beings, that they have the same right to life as any other child, as born or unborn, and it's recognized in Missouri law that that's the case. The legislature several years ago passed a statute that said that these are human lives from the moment of fertilization, and we're trying to protect that right.
Could this be a landmark case? How big could this be?
I think it very well could be. There are several of these cases going on around the country in different states. This is a first impression here in Missouri. Of course, different states have different laws, and they might treat these embryos differently. But we feel comfortable in Missouri anyway that they're acknowledged as being human beings from the moment of fertilization.
And in the legal process, where do you stand now? Have you asked to join it under an amicus brief? Has that permission been granted, or is that still pending?
Well, we filed our motion along with our brief yesterday, and the court has yet to rule on the motion. We anticipate that they'll accept our brief. Whether they'll rule in our favor, we don't know. But anyway, the appeal has been filed by Alicia's attorneys, and we have filed on behalf of Thomas Moore, actually on behalf of Missouri Right to Life, Lawyers for Life, and the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists are the joint parties that filed this amicus.
And did the little background? Did the embryos originally come from a third party?
No, these are
parents.
These are the parents. Yeah, it was a bonding of Alicia's eggs, her ex-husband's sperm and her eggs.
Okay. And I didn't mean to start with you out here. We're just doing a little pregame here.
Can I ask you a question? So, what part is the contract issue going to play in dealing with? I know that other contracts across the country have been honored. Hash's is not.
Yes, and actually we don't address that in our brief at all. I know that her attorney has addressed it in hers, but our position is that really it shouldn't matter because it's not a property interest. It's a human life, and so with regard to the contract, we don't think it's really pertinent. So
is there a news conference?
Yeah, we're going to have a news conference.
I want to thank you all for coming. My name's Gerard Nieders. I'm the Legislative Director of Missouri Right to Life and Special Counsel Attorney for the Thomas More Society. We're here to announce that Missouri Right to Life has joined with Lawyers for Life and the Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists to file an amicus brief in the case of Jasha McQueen versus Justin Gadbury. We urge the Missouri court to recognize that We're here to support Alicia's effort to obtain custody and bear her embryonic children. We urge the Missouri court to recognize the embryo's right to life as an unalienable right to be secured by the government as our parental rights. We stand here on the steps of the old courthouse in St. Louis, the place where our U.S. Supreme Court rendered that infamous decision that Dred and Harriet Scott were property. And today we are faced with the possibility that our Missouri courts will decide a human embryo is property just as well. Property that can be denied the right to life and simply disposed of at will. However, our brief, prepared by Mr. James Cole, General Counsel of Missouri Right to Life, and the excellent attorneys of the Thomas More Society in Chicago, clearly presents the undisputed science of human embryology that recognizes the fact that a human embryo is a human being from the moment of fertilization. It is when the human sperm joins the human egg. Thus, frozen embryos are not potential human life, but are actual living human beings with the potential for further development. The embryo is a human being just as the infant is a human being, just as the toddler is a human being, just as the adolescent is a human being, and just as Dred and Harriet Scott were human beings. In the words of Dr. Seuss's Horton, a person is a person, no matter how small. Missouri law already recognizes in statute that a human being exists at the moment of fertilization. We call upon the courts to thus act, to recognize this, and thus act in the best interest of the embryos of Alicia's children, and acknowledge that fact, and act in their best interests, and allow them to be born. The world today recognizes the heinous error of the 1857 Dred Scott decision, though it took a civil war to correct the error. Let not the courts of this state make a similarly egregious error. Natural law tells us the African American man is not property, and similarly it tells us that the human embryo is not property. We're fortunate to have with us today Jasha McQueen, the appellant in the case before the Missouri Court of Appeals, and the mother of the frozen embryos that are the subject of this case. Jasha would like to address you with a few words.
So, Gerard, what is your hope that the court will do?
We hope that the court will in fact recognize and acknowledge that the embryos are human beings, and that they should be awarded to Jasha so she can in fact have them and bear them and raise them.
What have you put in your amicus brief that's going to assist the court in making their decision?
Two things primarily. One is the science that supports our position. The fact that the embryos are human living beings is clear, it's indisputable, and it is, while this is not the first case to come up concerning human embryos, the science that has been presented thus far in prior cases has not been presented correctly, and so we want to first acknowledge that the science provides the fact that these are living human beings. The other issue that we're bringing before the court is the fact that Missouri law, in fact, acknowledges and recognizes human life as beginning at fertilization, which is when the sperm and egg combine, and from that point forward, Missouri law acknowledges and recognizes their rights, just as the rights of any other person living.
This issue has been litigated in other jurisdictions, I believe, including Chicago and a couple cases out in California. Is there any case law that would support what you guys are trying to accomplish?
There are some cases in other states. This is a case of first impression in Missouri, and while the courts have acknowledged that human embryos are not necessarily property, they haven't treated them as such. They have not treated them as human living beings. But that said, not all of the states have the statutes in place that Missouri has that does recognize the rights of the human embryo.
And it's your understanding that this is the first time that this issue will be litigated at the appellate level in Missouri?
It is a case of first impression here in Missouri.
What does that mean?
That means that it's not, this issue's not been brought to the court before today. for this case. Well, there aren't any directly on this point, but there are cases cited that refer to the different decisions where the courts have determined that embryos or unborn children in fact have rights as people or as persons. They're basically fetal homicide cases, there's wrongful death cases, they all acknowledge the unborn as having a right as a human living being.
Thank you, Jerry, for giving me this opportunity to come here and speak with you today. My name is Jasha McQueen. I am the mother of 5 children, 3 born and 2 unborn. The 2 that are unborn are in a frozen chamber waiting to be brought into this world. Many years ago, my ex and I decided to do in vitro fertilization. And out of that, God created 2 lives. Well, 4 lives. 2 of them are my twin boys, but the other 2 that are at issue right now are the ones that are frozen. These 2 lives are not just any random lives. These are my babies. These are my babies that are wanted babies. That have siblings at home, that will come to a wonderful family. These lives were created on purpose, not by accident. I want to give them the opportunity, the same opportunity that everybody here has, the opportunity to be born. I want to watch them grow. I want to watch them take their first steps. I want to do all those things that a mother would like to do with her children. I co-founded an organization called Embryo Defense, and through that I met so many people just like me. Parents that had to watch their children die at the hands of a judge. They're tragic stories, and they're people like me, but they're also different than me. They're pro-choice people, they're pro-life people, they're people from all walks of life. When you go through this process and you see your embryos and know you've created them, they're your babies, and you're pregnant. And it doesn't matter what your thoughts were or beliefs were before. And these people exist throughout the United States, thousands of them, just like me. And we want our babies. I want to send out a word of encouragement to all parents throughout the nation that are fighting. I want to send a word of encouragement out to Mimi Lee, to Nick Loeb, to anybody else as a parent who's fighting for their children. Keep fighting. Because we are fighting for something very worthwhile. Thank you.
How tough has this been for you?
This has been very tough. I think it's hard sometimes for people to understand what's going on because IVF is relatively new, and there's nobody else that I know of that has this problem, except for the people that I met through my organization. And they're there. I'm not alone, But I think that's the worst part, is when I was going through this, I felt like I was alone. And nobody could understand. People were saying, well, why don't you just go have some more kids? That's not the point. Lives can't replace other lives. That's not how it works. And if you have children, you understand that. It's been hard.
I understand you have some documentation from when the IVF procedure was first undertaken that stipulates that in the event of a dissolution of the marriage, the embryo will revert to you. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. We
Is that
discussed
something
this.
your attorneys can share with us? Copies of that contract?
I'm sure we probably can. I believe believe maybe I think I already gave it to Mandy Murphy, who did a story on it. But yeah, we signed it. We signed it twice. We signed it in 2007 when we graded them, and then we said yes in case of divorce or separation. And that's the difference between my case and a lot of these cases nationwide, is because there's two types of agreements. There's an agreement that is like a mutual consent, and that's a basic agreement. And then on top of that, there are other agreements that are more specific and have different provisions in it, particularly the provision for separation or dissolution. And that was my agreement. And so we talked about it, we agreed to it, he initialed it, he signed it, there was no question there.
And the trial court disregarded that. Why? Or didn't adhere to that agreement? Why?
I might.
They didn't.
Actually, all that is addressed in the appellant's brief. I mean, if you want to,
Yeah,
can get it
there's-
online.
I think that there was some dispute on your ex in terms of the circumstances. Is that a fair summary? I glanced at the brief.
Well,
In
yeah,
essence, there's-
you may want to read the brief. It goes more in detail, but basically he said he didn't know what he was signing, which I'm not sure that's a defense.
Oh, that was my question. Is it your ex who's fighting this, or
Yes.
is it the court? So it is
It's
your
my
ex.
ex, right? And the court sided with him. Yes.
So Jasha, this has a lot of undertones, right to life issues, that kind of thing. But how do you see this issue as affecting how the family courts prop up or do not support family values and the structure of the family in the country?
I think it's very sad that the courts are making parents go through this. Parents that have unborn children that are wanted, and they are demanding that the parents just stand by and watch a child die. Now, how did we ever come to this? I don't know. But there's something very wrong with that, particularly when there was an agreement in place. That to me makes no sense. I mean, it makes no sense anyway, just because, if you have a parent that wants a child and it's their child, what's the problem?
You obviously love your children.
I do. I love all 5 of them.
How long and how hard are you willing to fight?
Well, it's what?
Question was of
How long?
Tasha, how long and how hard is she willing to fight this fight for her embryos, for her children?
As long and as hard as it takes. Just like a mama bear would protect her children, or her bears, her cubs.
Since you invoked Dred Scott both explicitly and as well as with the location of this press conference, my question is: are your children also African American?
No, my children are not. No.
Can I ask you just some boring housekeeping questions? Your name is pronounced Tasha.
Hasha is my nickname, yes. Halesia is my real name, and that's what causes
Halesia.
issues. Halesia,
Okay.
yes.
And how old are you, and where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
I'm 43, and I'm almost going to be 44. January 16th is my birthday. And I'm an attorney
All right, and where do you live? In St. Louis?
in St. Louis,
Okay.
St. Louis County.
And how old are your born children?
Okay, my born children are, I have twin boys, they're 8, and then I have a 2-year-old.
And how long did the marriage last, and when did it break up?
Well, let's see, we got married in 2005, and we started divorce proceedings in 2010. And then that wasn't over with until last year.
Gotcha.
So technically, 9 years, but really 5 years.
Where are the embryos now, the frozen ones?
They are in Pennsylvania.
In a vault somewhere?
Yes, they're in a cryo-freeze vault.
I'm sorry, they're where?
They're in Pennsylvania.
Your ex is former military, is that correct?
Yes, and so am I.
And he's here in St. Louis area as
He
well?
is.
Does he have contact with the born children?
He does.
What's his profession?
I'm not sure. He does logistics work for a company. I think it's a steel company.
And how soon will you know whether you'll be allowed to join the case? What's the usual timetable?
I don't really know.
Is it
actually
weeks
how
or
long
months,
I
or-
wouldn't think it would be very long. I
Okay.
suspect we'd have to
All right.
answer
Thank you.
evidence, certainly.
Thank you.